Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It was the first time my grandson was going to stay with me alone. His parents were off on a short weekend trip, and I had volunteered, maybe even insisted, that he spend those 2 days with me. I wanted the house to feel alive again, to have laughter in it, footsteps on the old wooden floors, the sound of cartoons humming softly from the living room. You don't realize how quiet life becomes until a child's voice fills the air again. He was 12, curious, clever, and always with that half smile that reminded me of his father when he was little. I'd spent all morning making his favorite chocolate chip cookies, and the smell of butter and sugar lingered through the house as I waited for his knock on the door. When it finally came, I saw him standing there with his backpack slung over one shoulder, hair messy from the wind, his eyes bright and ready for adventure. "Grandma, I brought my tablet," he said before even stepping in. "But can we go outside later? I want to see the old swing." The old swing. It was still hanging from the oak tree at the back of the yard, though it creaked now when the wind pushed it. That swing had carried 2 generations already, first his father, then him. "Of course," I said, smiling. "But first, come on in. I made cookies, and you're not escaping without tasting them." He dropped his backpack by the door and gave me that quick, awkward hug that only boys his age can manage, half embarrassed, half genuine. Then he darted into the kitchen like he'd been there 1,000 times before. We spent the first few hours doing little things that didn't seem special at the time. We played cards, watched one of those nature documentaries he liked, and even made hot chocolate, the kind with tiny marshmallows. He told me about his friends, about a new game they all played online, and how his school was planning a camping trip in the spring. Listening to him, I couldn't help but drift between the present and the past, seeing his father at that same age, telling me similar stories, with the same excitement lighting up his face. Later, when the sun began to fade behind the trees, the house grew quieter. The light turned golden, the kind that makes everything look softer. I watched from the window as he sat on the swing, pushing himself gently, lost in thought. The yard was bathed in that evening glow, and for a moment, it felt like time had folded over itself. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler than I expected. I joined him under the tree, my steps slow, careful not to disturb whatever was going through his mind. He looked up and said, "Grandma, did Dad ever get scared when he was little?" The question caught me by surprise. "Of course he did," I said, smiling. "Everyone gets scared sometimes. Why do you ask?" He hesitated, his feet still on the ground, the swing unmoving now. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel scared at night. Not about monsters or anything. Just, like I'm growing up too fast, and I'll forget what it feels like to be small." His words hit me deeper than he could have known. There was something pure in the way children articulate fear, not of things they see, but of time slipping away from them before they understand it. I sat down on the porch step nearby. "You know," I said softly, "I used to think that growing up meant leaving things behind. But now I think it's about carrying them differently. You don't forget, you just learn to remember in a new way." He looked thoughtful, his eyes on the fading light. "Like the swing?" I smiled. "Exactly. Like the swing." We stayed outside until the sky turned dark. The stars came out one by one, and the air filled with the distant hum of crickets. Inside, I made him a little bed on the couch even though he could have slept in the guest room. He said he liked being near the fireplace. I didn't mind. I liked hearing his breathing while I read in my chair beside him. At one point, as the fire crackled low, he asked if I ever felt lonely in the house. The question was so direct, I nearly dropped my book. I told him the truth, yes, sometimes I did. But moments like this made all the quiet days worth it. He nodded, pulling the blanket closer around his shoulders. "I think I get that," he said softly. There was a stillness then, the kind that makes you aware of every sound, the ticking clock, the fire's sigh, the faint rustle of leaves outside. I watched him drift toward sleep, his face calm, almost peaceful. And I realized something: this visit wasn't just for him. It was for me too. I had spent so long thinking of myself as someone whose best moments were behind her, when my children were young, when the house was full. But sitting there, watching my grandson sleep, I understood that life keeps offering small chances to feel needed again, to be part of someone's growing up story. Before going to bed, I threw another log on the fire and looked once more at him. The glow from the flames brushed against his face, and for a fleeting moment, I saw my son again, 12 years old, asleep on that same couch. After a long day of play, I whispered quietly, "Good night, sweetheart," and turned off the lamp. That night, I couldn't sleep right away. The house felt alive again, not with noise, but with memory. The kind that warms you from the inside, the kind you know you'll hold on to long after the weekend ends. That I didn't know it yet, but those 2 days with him would change how I saw myself. They would remind me that connection doesn't fade with age, it deepens, if you let it. And sometimes, all it takes is a boy on a swing, a quiet evening, and a heart ready to listen. The next morning started with the smell of pancakes. I had woken up early, as I always do, and the house was wrapped in that calm morning silence that only comes before the day truly begins. The light was soft, spilling through the kitchen curtains in long golden stripes. I could hear birds outside, and somewhere down the hall, the faint sound of his footsteps told me he was awake. He appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, hair tousled, eyes still sleepy. "Grandma, did you already start breakfast?" I laughed. "Of course. You think I'd let you wake up to an empty kitchen?" He grinned, rubbing his eyes. "You make better pancakes than Mom," he said, then paused, as if realizing that might have sounded rude. I waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry, I won't tell her." We sat together at the table, syrup and butter between us, and the kind of easy silence that only comes when you feel safe with someone. He ate quickly, in that way only kids can, and halfway through his second pancake he asked, "Can we go into the attic today? Dad said there's a bunch of old stuff up there." The attic. I hadn't been up there in years. It was full of boxes, old photo albums, clothes, a few toys that had survived decades. "If you're brave enough to face the dust," I said, smiling, "then yes, we can." An hour later, we climbed up the narrow stairs, the light dim and grainy. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. He was immediately fascinated by everything: an old rocking horse, my husband's record player, boxes labeled Christmas, baby clothes, and books. He opened one of the boxes and pulled out a small wooden car. "Did Dad play with this?" "He did," I said, touching the edge of the toy. "He used to race it down the hallway until he broke one of the wheels. Your grandfather fixed it, though. He could fix anything." There was a pause. He looked at me carefully. "You miss him, don't you?" I nodded. "Every day. But you know, missing someone doesn't always have to feel sad. Sometimes it just reminds you how lucky you were to have them." He didn't say anything right away. Then he whispered, "I think Dad misses him too. He doesn't talk about it much, but I can tell." I sat down on an old chest and motioned for him to join me. "Your dad was your grandfather's pride." They spent hours fixing things together in the garage. Sometimes when I hear a hammer or the sound of a radio playing old country songs, it feels like they're both still in there. He nodded, staring at the toy car. Then, with a small smile, he said, "Maybe Dad and I can fix something too." I looked at him, feeling something shift inside me. That's how it happens: grief doesn't leave, it just finds new shapes in the next generation. We spent the rest of the morning opening boxes, laughing at old photos, and coughing from the dust. He found my high school yearbook and couldn't believe my hair had been that big in the 70s. We laughed until my sides hurt. By afternoon, we were sitting on the back porch again, this time with lemonade and peanut butter sandwiches. The sun was warm, the kind of warmth that makes you lazy, and the wind carried the sound of leaves rustling through the trees. He looked up from his sandwich and said, "Grandma, do you ever get scared of getting old?" I took a deep breath. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not because of the wrinkles or the gray hair, but because I don't want to stop learning new things. The world keeps moving so fast, it's easy to feel left behind." He thought about that for a moment. "But you're not left behind. You're just part of the old stuff that makes everything new make sense." I couldn't help but laugh. "That's one way to put it." He blushed. "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean, like, you know things. You remember things. I think that's important." His words touched me more deeply than he knew. I looked out at the trees and said quietly, "You're right. Remembering is important." That evening, we decided to build a small campfire in the backyard. He wanted to roast marshmallows, and I hadn't done that in years. The night air was cool, and the stars seemed brighter than usual. We sat close to the fire, its crackling sound filling the quiet spaces between our words. He told me about his dreams, how he wanted to become an engineer, maybe even design things that could help people. Dad says I should find something I love and do it every day, he said, staring into the fire. He's a wise man, I said softly. Do you think Grandad would be proud of him? More than proud, I answered. He'd be amazed. And I think he'd be proud of you too. He smiled, but I saw his eyes glisten a little in the firelight. Maybe he didn't expect the words to hit that deep, or maybe it was just the warmth of the flames reflecting in his eyes. We stayed there a long time, just watching the fire burn down to glowing embers. The air was filled with the smell of wood smoke and sugar. And in that quiet, something beautiful happened. Neither of us said anything, but there was a sense of understanding, a bond that didn't need words. When we finally went inside, he was the one who reached out and turned off the porch light. Let's leave the stars on tonight, he said. I smiled, my heart full. Good idea. That night, after he fell asleep, I stood by the window and watched the faint glow of the dying fire outside. The yard looked peaceful, almost sacred in the moonlight. It struck me how moments like these, simple, unplanned, quiet, can change the way you see life. He had come to stay for a weekend, but in truth, he was giving me something far greater, a reminder that love, in its purest form, isn't about words or gifts or big gestures. It's about showing up. And as I turned away from the window and glanced at him sleeping soundly on the couch, I whispered, "You showed up, my dear boy. And that's everything." The next morning, the air was different. Still warm, still familiar, but something about it felt more tender, more fragile, like time itself had slowed down to make space for us. The weekend was halfway over, and I could already feel that quiet ache of knowing it would end too soon. He woke up earlier than I expected, the way children sometimes do when they sense something special about the day. The light was pale and calm through the curtains, and he was sitting by the window, watching the mist rise off the yard. I walked in with 2 cups of cocoa, one for him, one for me, and he smiled when he saw me. "You're up early," I said softly. "I didn't want to waste the day," he replied. "Can we go fishing? Dad said you used to go with Grandad." It had been years since I'd been to the lake. The thought brought back memories so vivid they almost stung. Mornings by the water, the smell of pine trees, my husband's steady voice teaching our son how to cast the line. I hesitated, but his eager face was enough. "All right," I said. "Let's see if I remember how." We packed a small cooler, sandwiches, water, and a few cookies from the day before and drove out to Miller's Lake, just a short ride down the old country road. The road was lined with tall pines, their branches whispering above us as the car moved. He rolled down his window, the wind blowing through his hair, and I couldn't help but think of all the times I'd made that same drive with his father in the passenger seat. When we arrived, the lake was exactly as I remembered, still, quiet, and endless. The water reflected the sky like glass. We set up near the edge, the morning light dancing across the surface. I showed him how to bait the hook, how to cast gently, how to wait without rushing. He was patient at first, then restless, then patient again. "How long did it take Dad to catch his first fish?" he asked. "Oh, hours," I said, smiling. "He nearly gave up. But your grandfather told him that good things take time." He nodded thoughtfully. "Dad says that too." We sat side by side in silence, the kind that feels comforting, not empty. The sound of water lapping at the shore mixed with birdsong, and for a long while, I simply watched him, his concentration, his small hands gripping the rod, the gentle curve of his smile. Then, suddenly, the line tugged. "Grandma, I think I got one." I helped him pull it in, nothing big, just a small, silver flash, but the joy on his face could have lit up the whole lake. He laughed so hard that the sound echoed across the water. "I did it. I really did it." I laughed too, wiping my hands on a towel. "You sure did, sweetheart." We let the fish go, of course. Watching it swim away, he said quietly, "I think I get what Grandad meant. You can't rush something you care about." The words lingered in the air, delicate and true. For a moment, it felt like his grandfather was there too, sitting somewhere nearby, smiling at us both. Later, we spread a blanket under a tree and ate our sandwiches. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of water and grass. He told me about his friends again, how one of them didn't have grandparents anymore, and how lucky he felt to have me. I like it here, he said between bites. It's quiet. I think people forget how nice quiet can be. I nodded, looking out over the water. Quiet lets you hear the things you can't when the world is too loud. He smiled. Like your heart. I looked at him, surprised by his words. Exactly, I said, my voice almost a whisper. On the drive home, he dozed off in the passenger seat, his head tilted toward the window. The afternoon light painted his face in soft gold, and I found myself studying him, as though I could memorize every line, every shadow. He looked so peaceful, so untouched by the world's weight. I wanted to keep him that way forever, but I knew I couldn't. When we got back home, he went straight to the backyard swing again. The sun was setting, the air filled with the smell of grass and the faint hum of summer insects. I watched from the porch as he leaned back, feet in the air, hair catching the light. It was one of those perfect, fleeting scenes that you wish you could bottle up and keep forever. As the evening settled in, he came to sit beside me on the porch. Grandma, he said quietly, I think I understand something about you. Oh. I smiled. What's that? You remember everything, he said. Even the little things. That's your superpower. I looked at him for a long moment, his earnest young face turned toward me. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe remembering is just how we love people when they're not around. He nodded. That makes sense. We sat there until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing, the kind of conversations that mean more than either of us could have realized at the time. When I tucked him in that night, he whispered, Grandma, when I'm older, I'll still come visit you. Even if I'm busy. I smiled, brushing the hair from his forehead. I'll hold you to that. After he fell asleep, I stayed by the window again, looking out at the darkened yard. The swing moved gently in the night breeze, empty now but still alive with memory. That weekend had begun as just a visit, but I knew now it was becoming something else, a thread that tied generations together, soft but unbreakable. And as I turned off the lights and listened to his quiet breathing, I felt a deep peace settle in my chest, the kind that comes when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what matters most. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. The weekend that had stretched wide open before us now felt like it was slipping away one heartbeat at a time. The house was warm with the smell of toast and coffee, but there was a quietness to it, an awareness that soon, he'd be going home. He was sitting at the kitchen table, building something with the old puzzle pieces I'd found in a drawer. Grandma, he said without looking up, why do grown-ups always say time goes fast? It feels slow to me. I smiled as I poured my coffee. Because the older you get, the more you realize how precious it is. The days don't actually move faster, we just start wishing we had more of them. He looked thoughtful, pressing two pieces together. So when I'm old, will weekends feel short like this one? Maybe, I said softly. But if you fill them with things that matter, they'll still feel full. He nodded and went back to his puzzle. The sunlight coming through the window caught his face in that golden glow I'd come to love, the kind that makes you want to pause time, just to hold on to the moment a little longer. We spent the morning cleaning up the little messes we'd made over the past 2 days. The empty cocoa mugs, the pile of blankets from the couch, the fishing gear by the door. He hummed quietly as he worked, and I realized I hadn't heard the house this alive in years. At noon, his parents called to say they were on their way. He didn't show it, but I could tell he wasn't ready to leave. Truth be told, neither was I. Can we go for one last walk before they come? He asked. Of course, I said. Let's go to the trail behind the hill. The sky was a soft blue, the air cool with the scent of pine. The trail wound through the trees like a secret passageway, one I used to walk with his father when he was little. We walked slowly, his hand brushing against mine every so often, not because he needed help, but because he wanted the comfort of connection. Halfway down the path, we came to a clearing that overlooked the town. The view stretched far, the church steeple, the rows of houses, the silver ribbon of the river winding through the valley. He stood there quietly, just taking it all in. Grandma, he said after a while, when I'm older, I want to remember this. Not just today, but how it feels right now. I swallowed hard, fighting back the lump in my throat. Then promise me something, I said gently. Promise you'll always take a moment to remember where you came from. The people, the places, the stories. They'll guide you when you don't know what to do. He turned to look at me, eyes clear and honest. I promise. We stood there for a while longer, not talking, just watching the world below us. It wasn't about the view, it was about being there together, in that quiet space between past and future. When we finally returned home, his parents' car was already in the driveway. The sound of the engine idling felt like a clock striking the end of something precious. He ran inside to grab his backpack, but then stopped halfway up the stairs. He turned, looked at me, and said, "Grandma, can I come again next weekend?" I laughed softly. "You don't even want a break from me?" He grinned. "Not really." His parents came in, and the house filled with voices again, thank yous, small talk, laughter. But all I could focus on was him hugging me at the door, tighter than before. "I'll miss you," he said. "I'll miss you too," I whispered. "Drive safe, and don't forget, next time, I'll teach you how to make my pancakes." He smiled, waved one last time, and then he was gone. The car disappeared down the road, and the house fell back into its familiar quiet. Only this time, it didn't feel lonely, it felt full. I walked back to the porch and sat down on the old swing. The chains creaked, the wood beneath me warm from the sun. The same swing he'd played on that first evening. The yard was still, except for a single leaf drifting down from the oak tree, spinning slowly before landing on the grass. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the wind fill the silence. The laughter, the stories, the moments, they all lingered there, soft and alive, like a melody I could still hum even after the song had ended. That weekend reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Love doesn't fade with years, it simply changes its rhythm. It becomes quieter, steadier, deeper. As the afternoon light began to fade, I whispered to the empty yard, "Thank you for reminding me what it means to feel alive again." And though the house was quiet, it felt as if somewhere on the wind, in the leaves, in the echo of the laughter still hanging in the air, life was smiling right back.